Welcome to the show, Dr. Dan Handford. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, I always, try to think back as to, how to start the story, because there's just so much that has gone on. I'm only 35 years old, but I've accomplished quite a bit. And I know that there's a lot more for me to accomplish as I continue to grow, in this space. But one of the things I would say is that, my background is that I've always been an entrepreneur. I've been in business for as long as I can remember. I mean, I always tell people that when I was born, I was trying to negotiate with the medical doctor about which cheek he was going to slap, to make sure I could cry, So I've always had that kind of a bent to me. But my very first business was that I would say is a true business was a business that I had started in right out of high school. I didn't want to go to college. I just want to go straight into business. And so I started this business selling a weight loss product, oddly enough. Now, and prior to that, when I was in high school and throughout my entire, elementary school and stuff like that, I was always hustling, always doing something, I was always selling something, whether it was going door to door selling, candy or, chocolates, or popcorn or whatever it was. I remember selling Cutco knives at one point. I remember going through and I did pressure cleaning on houses and had large contracts actually that we had gotten with gas stations to do those, 3 or 4 times a year. And of course, we did some things like mowing lawns and, just like raking leaves, just, that kind of stuff too. But my true first business, I would say, was this weight loss company. And, the next company after that was a web design company. And then I went into the field of chiropractic. And then from the field of chiropractic, started into the online space. I'm doing a lot of, I have a couple websites where we do some drop shipping. And they do really well. We've had them for over 10 years now, do over 7 figures in sales. And every year since the first year, we've been doing that. So it's been pretty neat to kind of see how that consistently continues to go. And then I also have 5 medical offices that I own and run here in South Carolina. So I originally grew up in Greenville, South Carolina, went to school in Atlanta, and then went back to Columbia, South Carolina once I got married with my wife, because that's where her family's from. So that's kind of in the nutshell, without filling in any of the details, where kind of a little bit about my background.
Awesome. Growing up, what do you think is one of the greatest lessons your parents taught you?
Well, my parents had a business when they always had a business when I was growing up. Sadly, right now they don't have a business. My dad my mom was the one who had the business, because my dad was the one who always worked a full-time job. But then he would come home in the evenings and he would work on the business. Like, he would do the books and the finances and the paperwork and that kind of thing. And so I would say the biggest thing that I learned from my parents is not necessarily always what to do, but is what not to do. When it comes to business, one of my mom's biggest flaws was that she is you've heard of the love languages, right? Like, everybody has their own love language. Mm-hmm. Well, her love language is that she's a very giving person. She will take the shirt off of her back and give you that, before anything. She would take a bullet for you. I mean, that's just the kind of person she is. And I remember there were certain times where, Christmases would come along and, we really didn't have much, but she would sacrifice a lot to make sure we had a really good Christmas. And, but that bled over into the business world. And it was hard for her to always, it was hard for her to not say no to people when they would come in and they'd say, "Hey, I've been working for you for 3 or 4 years, I'd like to have a raise." And, instead of trying to discuss with them, the nuances as to why she could or could not do that, or maybe not give them the full amount, she just felt obligated to give it to them. I'll do whatever it takes to make that work, And at the end of the day, I personally believe that's what eventually took down their business, was the fact that they got overexpensed and they just couldn't continue to pay the expenses. And they just got higher and higher and higher. And she was having a hard time with that. And she never wanted to fire anybody. Mm-hmm. So it's funny because right now in every single one of my businesses, I always look at, are there areas that we are spending money where we don't need to spend money? And I think that was probably one of the lessons that my parents taught me, even though that they probably don't even know that they taught me that. because it was one of those things that from an outsider looking in, that's what I saw, was that it was really that they didn't pay attention that well to their expenses. And it wasn't that they didn't pay attention to their expenses. It was that when they saw that the expenses were going up, they didn't either know what actions to take, or they didn't take the actions that were necessary to keep the business afloat. And there are certain times that are really hard for a business owner, that you have to make decisions based on the company as a whole and not just on one individual person. You've heard of the phrase that, one bad apple can ruin the bunch.
Right.
Well, it's very true. And in like our medical offices, we have, close to 50 employees now. But when I make decisions, my decisions now don't only affect just me and my small staff of 3 or 4 people that I used to have. It now affects 50 different people. And if you think about it, it's not 50 people, it's 50 families. And so the average family having 3 or 4 people, you're affecting 150 to 200 people when you make decisions. And so you have to balance that, where, sometimes you have to let one person go or change what you're doing to, and I don't want to say sacrifice them, because you're not really sacrificing them, but you have to maybe let them go so that the whole entire organization doesn't go down with them. So I would say that would probably be my biggest lesson that I learned from my parents.
That's pretty interesting, though, that even when you were a kid and you saw this, and that your mom couldn't necessarily make the tough decisions, and then now you've got the podcasts about making tough decisions. That's pretty interesting there.
Yeah. I actually thought about at one point inviting my mom on, and maybe even my dad at the same time, and kind of walking them through some of those tough decisions that they did or did not make, because I have never really sat down with them and asked them, when all of this started to happen, what was going through your head? Like, what are some things that you were thinking about? And so it's a sad situation, because I hate that it happened to them. Because their entire life savings was built up in that company, and then it went under, and they don't really have much now as it is. But it's definitely one of those things that is a fear inside of me, that I might lose a business because of the expenses. And so I tell you, every single year, my wife and I sit down. We have our, if you want to call it a board meeting, if you will. We sit down and we're like, all right, let's look at the books and let's figure out, where are we spending money that we don't need to spend money, so that we can reduce expenses. And it's not just staff. I'm talking about other things too. Like, was there some sort of subscription that we bought that we're not using anymore? Is there a product that we bought that we can now sell because we're not using it, or whatever the case may be? And those are the kind of things that I think, as a business owner, you have to always constantly use as a check and balances. What are you spending right now that you don't need to spend money on, that you can get rid of, so that you can continue to prosper?
Yeah, that's definitely an important thing to be aware of.
Yeah.
When you were growing up, and you're talking about all these businesses that you were running and being a part of, what was your dream at the time? What was your goal that you had in mind?
When you're in high school, sometimes or even younger than that, in elementary school, you have dreams about things that, as you get older, they shift and they change. But I do remember one very specifically, and my mom reminded me of it the other day. She said, so when are you going to get that Z3 Roadster, that BMW Z3 Roadster? And I was like, what are you talking about? She goes, you used to go through these magazines, these car magazines, and you would cut out clippings of these BMW Z3 Roadsters, and you would stick them up on your wall, and you would say, I am going to have one of those one day, and I'm going to work so I can get to one of those things one of these days. And it's funny, because now I have no desire to have one of those. I'm actually an Audi fan. So I drive an Audi A7, and I love it. It's my second version of an Audi. I had the Audi A5 first, and the A5 first, which is their 2-door coupe. And then I upgraded to the A7 because we got more people in our family and needed more room, so we got a 4-door coupe, which is the A7. But I've thought about it, that maybe I should just go and buy one, just because I used to say that I was going to get one just to have it, because you can get them fairly inexpensive now.
Right.
But because I know now they don't even make those. It's the Z4 now that they're making. And I don't even know if they're making that one anymore. But growing up, that was my dream. It was pretty materialistic, and just wanting to have that car, that BMW Z3, and that's what continued to drive me. And I really don't know, what it is inside of me sometimes that drives me, because I, sometimes sit back and I go, why do I like doing what I'm doing? And every time, I have multiple businesses. We have 8 different companies now, and every single one of them I've built up from scratch. We didn't buy any of them. I built them up from scratch, and then I've placed people in them to manage and run them so I can go on and build the next business.
Right.
So, it's one of those things that I finally, it was probably about a year ago that I finally sat down. I was like, you know what? I know what I enjoy in business. I enjoy the growth aspect of business. But once I get it to a point where it's stabilized, that's not where I thrive. My thriving is growing and expanding and taking my vision of something and giving it to a team and making sure it actually gets done. And also, doing some boots on the ground. When we were starting these 5 medical offices, I was the one that went and found the location. I was the one that, laid out the office. I was the one that, found the contractors, managed the bidding out of everything, and making sure that the exam rooms were the right sizes. And I was the one that went and hired the first team for each one of the offices and trained them for the first 2 or 3 months. And so that was an area that I excelled at. But I also knew at the end of the day, I couldn't expand fast enough if I was always the one that had to train everybody.
Right.
Until I found video training. And so, we didn't do it on YouTube or anything, but we use a software called Lightspeed VT, Lightspeed Virtual Training. They're based out of Las Vegas, and they basically allowed us to create short 2 to 3, sometimes 4 or 5 minute training videos on every little nick and cranny and nuance in our practices and our businesses, so that when somebody did come on and they were hired, they could be trained by me or my wife, because we had training videos in place. And the nice thing about it is right now I have a corporate meeting once a month with my team there. And one of the things that they mentioned is that we need to update some of the videos, which is kind of nice because we did short 2 to 3 minute videos. So we didn't have to re-record a whole hour and a half segment if that was how long the segment was. We basically just can pull out 1 or 2 videos out of a segment and just re-record those few videos. And that's what has allowed us to be able to expand. Still, I still feel like I'm the best person to train my staff, but I just couldn't physically be there at all times. Right. And now I walk into my practices sometimes because of turnover, and there's people in there that I've never met, but it's like they know me from, for a long time because they've been watching me on videos training them. So it's kind of cool to be able to do that too.
Yeah, for sure. What was you'd say your first big success?
So this kind of will go back to my first online, not my first, but my first success with an online company. When I finished the weight loss product that I had started, that company went down because it was an ephedra product. And of course they pulled that from the market, we weren't able to sell it anymore. But the money that we made off of that, I had a partner at the time that basically got into some drugs, had some drug issues. And so basically took the money and ran. And so I decided to start a company where we did web design, web hosting, those kind of things. And so I already had a background in being able to develop websites and, create the back end on the hosting and all this kind of stuff. And so it was very, very beneficial for me to be able to do that. And so when I started chiropractic college, one of the things that we all needed in chiropractic college was a spine model, and so in our bookstore on campus, they had a spine for sale there that was for sale for $185. And of course, not knowing what the prices of spines would be, you might not think that's that bad. But I started to do some research once I found that a lot of the students were complaining about not being able to afford $185 for a spine model. And I found the exact same spine model being sold online for like $85. And so I decided to call that distributor up, which is now, fast forward, one of my biggest competitors. But I called that distributor up and I said, how much could you sell the spine to me if I can get an order of 20 spines available? And they said, well, we could probably get it to you for about $65, and that would include the shipping. And so I was like, wow, okay, so I can make $5 per spine. That'd be great. I mean, that's a couple $100 to be able to sell 20, 30 spines.
Right.
And so I put an order form together, drove people to a website to be able to fill out their information, pay with PayPal, or give me a check and fill out a paper form, however they wanted, but they had to have it prepaid. Like I wasn't going to like have a bunch of IOUs out there. I wanted to have the money up front, right?
Right.
So I was smart in that regard. And then I basically took those forms and got in front of each one of the students, the classes. And each class is usually between about 80 and 120 students. And so I got in front of several of the different classes. And then the first week I had 80 orders of those spines with the money up front and in hand.
Oh, wow.
And I was like, just like so excited about it, because I'm going $80. I mean, 80 spines times $5. I'm making a couple $100 there,
Yeah.
And so then I sat back one night and I was like, before I placed the order with that distributor, I was like, I wonder if I can call the manufacturer directly and cut out the middleman. And so that's what I did. I found the manufacturer of it and called the manufacturer up. I called their dealer services and basically said that, I'm looking at possibly becoming a dealer. And I have this order of 80 spines I wanted to place initially to get my account set up. And they basically said, well, how many times a year can you sell that many spines? And I'm like, well, there's in the school, in our chiropractic college program, there's a new set of students that comes in every 3 months. So 4 times a year, I could do that.
Mm-hmm.
They're like, wow, well, what we'll do is we'll go ahead and set you up on our highest tier discount. So you have the best discount of any dealer in our program because you can sell so much. I think the minimum at that time was like $15,000 a year, which, really wasn't much when you're talking about selling 80 spines at $70 a piece or $65 a piece or whatever. And, but she said that I remember talking to the lady, I remember her name and all this kind of stuff now too, but I won't mention all that. But she basically told me, she said, well, if you do that, then I can sell you that spine model for $42.48. I was like, my jaw almost dropped, I'm doing the math in my head. I'm going, that's like, instead of a couple $100, that's a couple $1,000, that I'm making off that transaction. And she said, and I'll go ahead and throw in the shipping too, so I'm like, wow, that's even better. And so it opened me up to their entire catalog of being able to sell over 2,000 of their products, which that's one of the companies that we have today that's continued to do 7 figures, which is a company called Shop Anatomical. And we sell skeletons and skulls and brains and hearts. And now the spines are like less than 5% of what we sell. We sell a lot more, other plastic models for anatomy labs and colleges and universities and governments and professionals and, pharmaceutical drug companies and various things like that. And so it's really been a great success that, it's one of those things that I've thought about selling for a while just because I don't do anything with it anymore, but we still, profit wise, we're in the 6-figure range for the profit on that business. And I don't do much for it at all. I have really one person that manages most of that stuff for me because it's mainly drop ship. We've started over the last probably 6 or 7 years bringing in some containers overseas, but now we just ship them to the Amazon warehouses and, we sell them through Amazon, but we also sell through our own website as well. We still sell probably 70% of our product is through our own website. About 30% is from Amazon. But that thing right there, I always look at that, the lessons that are learned from, that encounter. And many people try to create products before there's an audience. And then they try to sell that product and then there's no audience there. And so you start to have these frustrations that are created because you have this passion behind a product, but you don't have an audience behind it. Right. And so what I did with this is I found a problem that an audience was already having, and then I solved that problem. And it allowed me to open up to this 2,000 more products that I could sell. And so I think as entrepreneurs, I think that it's always good to always have your eyes open and your ears attuned to what is happening around you, because there are audiences around you all the time that have problems that you can solve. And so instead of trying to create the unicorn product that may or may not, activate an audience to be able to purchase or, put money into, try to find problems that are around you now that you can create products for that can solve those problems. It's a whole lot easier to do that than to try to, risk a lot more on those unicorn products, because there are products out there that didn't have an audience that they're doing really well, they're doing phenomenal, but again, those are the unicorn, examples that, I don't think is good to have a general term sense of, unless you have tons of money and you want to create a bunch of risky products that may or may not have an audience. But most of us don't have that luxury of being able to, spend, $3 or $4 million on a project for it to go belly up because there's no audience. And so it's one of those things that I would say that is the biggest lesson that I've learned, is always making sure that you create or have an audience first before you start to try to sell a product.
Right. And it's like, I think there's a quote from Elon Musk. He said, you're paid in direct correlation to the level of problem that you solve. So
Yep.
if you want to make $1 million, solve $1 million problem.
Exactly. Yeah. You definitely have to have the problem aspect of it. Cause that's the biggest thing is that we're problem solvers, and until you can start to solve problems that a lot of people have, because I talked to somebody just the other day on our own podcast that basically said that he created an app that solved one of his own problems. But the problem with that is that he was pretty much the only one with that problem. Right. And so just because one person has a problem, that does not mean you have an audience that has a problem. When I think of an audience, I think of hundreds of thousands of, of people that have a problem that you could solve so that you could actually make money or make it profitable for you. And make it worth your time of being able to solve that problem.
Definitely. Tell us a little bit about how you got started with the Handford Capital.
Sure. So I would probably say the biggest thing is that once I actually started making some good money, I was tired of writing 6-figure checks to the government. And so I wanted to find a way that I can start to, keep my own money if I could. And so real estate was the thing that really, turned me on to, being able to start Handford Capital. And so with Handford Capital, we raise money from outside investors to purchase large multifamily apartment complexes that are valued in the range of about $5 million up towards to about $50 million. Our largest deal right now is about $52 million. We just recently closed on a deal in Houston, Texas, that was about $15.4 million. And so what we do is we try to find investors that have liquid capital that they want to invest into an investment vehicle that they can put into for 5 to 7 years and cash flow off that property, but also to have higher or better than average returns that you would normally have in the stock market or another traditional investment vehicle. And so one of the things that our main goal with Handford Capital is capital preservation, which is something that you don't usually get. Not usually, you don't really get that at all when you invest in the stock market. You could tank today and you lose all of your capital. But in these real estate deals, not only do you get to preserve your capital and cash flow of the property, but at the end of the year, even though you've made money on the property, you get to show a loss on your taxes at the end of the year due to the depreciation off of the actual property that we're buying. And so my lights just went off here. There we go. So the depreciation is accelerated in these larger complexes. Instead of taking 27 years to depreciate the property, we're actually able to depreciate it over 5 to 15 years. And so we're able to accelerate the depreciation. So it shows an even bigger loss to offset some of the other passive income that you have. And then it also, Trump just enacted in his new tax law an additional $1 million bonus depreciation on top of that in the first year. So these properties are doing very, very well, and the returns on them are just phenomenal, especially because you don't have to, you can show a loss on the property each year over year, even though you're making money off of it. So that's what our main goal is with that, is to, it was originally selfish for me because I wanted to be able to reduce my taxable liability, but also park my money somewhere that I knew I was making money off of. And instead of, like a lot of people say, trading time for dollars, I wanted to be able to, trade dollars for dollars, if you will, or trade small dollars for bigger dollars. So.
Right. Have you done any investing of your own aside from Handford Capital?
Most of my investments have been in my own businesses. So, just taking out my own capital and putting it back into the businesses. I'm not the type of person that takes a bunch of money out of my businesses. I usually keep it in the businesses, reinvest it, and constantly improving things. And so most of my money I put into my businesses, and I put it into my businesses in a smart way where I can actually make money off of it. So I've over the years, I've had many, financial people come to me and say, well, you can open up a, an IRA or a, retirement account of some sort and park your money there. And I'm like, well, how much is that going to make me? Oh man, you can make between 5 to 7% a year. And I'm like, yeah, but I can put that same money in my business and double or triple it,
Right.
So I haven't really built up a lot of that. So my goal is to really, build up a portfolio of these multifamily properties that are, cash flowing very nicely, and be able to help other investors at the same time do that same thing. Because the more you can start to understand what real estate can do for you, I wish I would have known about it, 5 years ago, because I would be in a totally different position now than I am right now. But obviously, we learn from our past and we move forward. And, it's one of those things that's helped me to be able to talk to other people, that are younger than me, that, I can tell them, hey, don't forget about this thing. You have some money, put it in these things, because it'll start paying you, and you can show a loss, and it'll reduce your taxable liability at the same time.
So what would your advice be to, not just younger people, but anybody who wants to get started in investing, who knows nothing about it?
Well, I would say the first thing that I would suggest you do is, I could definitely be a resource for you. And as far as if you're wanting to do multifamily, I like the multifamily space, because especially the large multifamily, because of the ability to cost segregate, which allows you to accelerate the depreciation on these assets. We have a website, handfordcapital.com, that, your listeners, if they're interested, can go there, check us out. There's a place on there that if you wanted to reach out to me, and I can easily jump on a call with you, kind of, send you our company overview, kind of show you some of the properties that we're trying to do. But it really is one of those things that I like to talk to each one of our investors first, because I want them to understand what type of an investment vehicle this is, because it's not for everybody. Somebody who wants to have the ability to pull out their equity in 6 months or a year or 3 years from now, it's not the best option, because it's a non-marketable security, which means that it's not on the stock market. So on the stock market, you can throw $10,000 at something, or $50,000 or $100,000 at something, and then when you're ready to get out, you can press a button and you can get out. With these, it's what they call a non-marketable security. You could get out, but you'd have to find somebody to actually pay for that stock that you have in that apartment complex to pull it out. It's not an easily marketable thing. And so my suggestion is always to, find, if you have money that you don't want to touch for a long time, 5-7 years, then it's a good investment vehicle. But if you need the money, then it's not a good investment vehicle. So most of the time, though, we're looking for accredited investors. So I'm not sure, what everybody knows about accredited investors. Most people I talk to don't know what that means. I didn't know about it in the very beginning either, but it's basically an investor who has one of two things. They either have $1 million of net worth, or they have an income of at least $200,000 if they're single, or $300,000 if they're a couple, of annual income, and they expect that to continue. So we can't. That's the type of investor that we usually work with, but we do have a select number of what are called sophisticated investors, who are investors that don't meet that criteria, but we know on some level that they have some ability to understand the financial ramifications of what they're doing, and they can make those proper financial decisions. So we can accept some of those type of investors as well. But for those of you who are curious, you can always go to handfordcapital.com and fill out the form there and let us know. We don't have any active, opportunities right now, so I'm not trying to pitch that to anybody, but, just because you asked that, that would be my biggest suggestion to you, is to jump on a call with me. I like the multifamilies, again, just because of the stability of them. And when you start to look at trying to buy single family properties, you start to go from, 100% occupancy to 0% occupancy and overnight when somebody leaves. And so when you have an apartment complex where you have over 100 people 100 doors in each unit, or in each complex, you lose one tenant out of 100 and you're only at 99% occupancy. Right. So it really, hedges your bets and your risks a little bit. And as long as you have a good sponsor that's, putting the deal together, then, your money is pretty safe.
Do you have any tips for people who want to invest but don't have any money?
Well, I think the biggest thing there would be depending on their situation. If they don't have any money, you got to figure out a way to get some money. So, whether that's starting your own business, whether that's getting a good job, whether that's, reducing some of your own personal expenses so that you can start to have some money. A lot of those types of questions are really good to jump on a phone call with somebody, because you can figure out what their personal situation is.
Right.
Because, somebody who calls me up and says, "Hey, I don't have any money. I don't know where to begin. How can I invest with you?" But then I figure out that, they haven't worked in 10 years and they don't want to work the rest of their life. Well, there's not much I can do there for you. But for somebody, that is just starting out, and they're really wanting to do some big things for their life, and, they want to, I always, I always say, starting a business is a good idea, but it's always a personal decision, because, honestly, it's not a good idea for everybody to start their own business, because not everybody has those skill sets and not everybody has that ability to do that. So it just really depends on the person and their situation.
Where do you see yourself 10 years from now?
Wow. So I would say 10 years from now, my goals would be to, I always told myself that I was going to, if you will, retire by the time I was 40. And so I'm 35 years old now, and and the reason why I do air quotes with retire, because I don't believe in retirement. There is not going to be a day in my life that I'm going to sit there and say I am retired. But for the people who think of retirement, my goal of retirement is to be able to have enough passive income coming in from various sources that I can pretty much go and do whatever I want. Right now I have, little kids, and, I had somebody recently ask me, well, how much money do you need to have to be able to, go and do whatever you want? And it's interesting, because right now, I mean, I'm to the point where I could travel and go and do whatever I wanted if it all had to do with the monetary aspect of things. I have the ability to do that. I have the ability to buy a Lamborghini, but I'm not going to do that. It's just not me.
Right.
I don't have the desire to, I would say, waste my money on something like that. I have other things that I want to put that money in. So I would say in 10 years from now, because I have small children, I will most likely not continue. I will not be at that point, because I don't want to be traveling and doing and all this kind of stuff if I can't bring my family along with me. So I have 4 little ones right now. I think 10 years from now, my oldest will be graduating high school,
Yeah.
my first one. So I'll have 3 more that'll be going from there. And so my youngest one will be just about 11 years old at that point. So I'll have a few more years left of that to take care of. But, my wife and I have talked about, kids with us, and just kind of live around the world in various different countries and just experience things with the children and have them bring them with us. But right now we can't do that because they're young. Our youngest is 6 months old. So it's kind of hard to, travel around with a 6-month-old as well as a 2-year-old. And then we also have a 7-year-old and a 6-year-old. So a lot of those things kind of, play into the factors and kind of factor into some of the things that I'd like to do. But I would say, 10 years from now, being able to continue to have some successful businesses, I would like to, within 10 years, exit some of these businesses as well and kind of move on and go to the next business. I think, the hardest thing for me about an exit is that these businesses are like my kids,
Yeah.
I grew them from the very beginning and have grown them to this point. And I haven't bought any of my own companies. I've always started them from scratch. And so to part with them is the hard part. And I think that with Shop Anatomical, the very first successful one, it's been very hard to even think about trying to let that one go because of that first success. But also my wife and I have always told ourselves that if for some reason something was to happen with all the other businesses, we could always go back to that and do pretty well. We could make a pretty good, decent living just running that one company.
Exactly.
But that's, so I would say, 10 years from now, I would love to be able to just, be at a passive income standpoint and just enjoying the family, enjoying life.
Awesome, man. Well, what do you want to be remembered for at the end of your life?
Sure. I would say that, first and foremost, I would want to be remembered as a good father to my children. And that I was a good, I was able to, uh, transform the minds of other people, really entrepreneurs, and being able to take themselves to the next level. And then from there, being able to encourage my children to take their next steps too. So to leave them with the ability to do that. And honestly, one of the things that, we're doing the podcast for us is to leave that podcast after my wife and I are gone from this earth, for our children to be able to listen to us and hear the stories that everybody from around the world has, and for them to know that we have friends around the world,
Yeah.
now from the podcast. And it's going to be kind of neat to be able to put together a traveling around the world, type of thing that we're going to do with the whole family, because now we're meeting people from all over the world that we can now call up and say, hey, we want to stop by your place for a week and crash on your couch, or wherever, or what's the best hotel near you, and we can spend the week with your family or something, and provide those experiences for our children.
Awesome. Well, we're entering the lightning round now. First question: what book would you recommend others to read?
Okay, so a couple of these are probably going to tie into each other a little bit during the lightning round, but the book that I would recommend that has really transformed me over the last, I'd probably say year and a half, is Grant Cardone's book, The 10X Rule.
Yep.
And when I first read one of his first books, which I think was Sell or Be Sold, I really didn't like it. And the book was given to me by a friend of mine at a mastermind group that I was doing, I wasn't doing the mastermind, but I was there participating. It was a very small group of physicians, about 5 of us in the Dominican Republic. We were there for a 5-day retreat. And he gave all the guys a book. There was all 5 of us this book, and I took it home. And I'm not a big reader, so I read a lot of stuff like emails and stuff like that all the time, and I read articles. But I'm a big Audible fan, so I listen to probably at least 4 or 5 books a month on Audible. Whether I'm driving or working out or wherever, and so I didn't really want to read it because it was paper, So, and that might have been the reason why I didn't like the book. I don't know, but I read the book and didn't really like it, but something inside of me was like, but the guy's got some good material and some good content.
Yeah, it's got a lot of good content.
Yeah. So I decided to go ahead and buy his next book, or this other book, which is the 10X Rule. And his Audible version of that book is absolutely hilarious. If you've never listened to the Audible version of it, it's just funny because he ad-libs throughout the entire thing. And I'm sitting there working out, and all of a sudden I'm just busting out laughing. Of course, the person beside me is like, what are you doing? But it was something that really transformed my level of thinking. And, I have 5 medical practices here in South Carolina, and I didn't exit them. I stepped down from being the CEO because of that book. And so that book, because like I said, I'm 35, I feel like I've accomplished a lot, but I don't feel like this is my full potential. I still feel like there's more, and I feel like it's wrong for me to stay in that current state if I know that there's something else that's bigger and better and greater for me. And so after reading that book, and the whole premise behind the book is, to 10X your life. If you're trying to set goals for yourself, a lot of people will say, well, set small, achievable goals. And his whole concept behind that is hogwash. I don't want to set small goals. I want to set big, unachievable goals, because it changes your mindset.
Exactly.
And it's true. If you're trying to collect $1 million a year, well, I would suggest setting your goal at $10 million a year instead of $1 million, because your mindset changes to try to get to that 10 million versus $1 million. And so at the end of the year, would you rather come short of $1 million or come short of 10 million?
Yeah. It's like the quote, shoot for the moon, because even if you'll miss, you'll land among the stars.
Right.
That idea.
Yep. So that's why I like that book. I would highly recommend it. And usually people who follow Grant Cardone are either lovers or haters of him. I'm kind of in the middle. I like a lot of the stuff that he does. I laugh at a lot of the stuff that he does. It's quite funny. I actually have been to a couple of his conferences. I've been to his sales boot camp, and I'm not even in like true like a sales position, but
Mm.
I wanted to just go to be a fly on the wall, you know. And so I was, and then I went to his 10X Growth Con that he had, his second one that he did in Las Vegas back in
Right.
February of 2018. So
Awesome. Yeah. I bought the online versions of those. So there's a lot of good content in those.
yeah, I love it.
Yeah, for sure. Along with Audible and listening to books and things like that, what's a daily habit that contributes to your success?
Sure. So, a lot of people talk about sitting down and writing down things that they're going to do during that particular day and just having that focused time. One of the things that I do, obviously I'm married, and so I have my wife that, I want to make sure I'm spending time with her. So one of the things that we do every morning is we get our cup of coffee in the morning, and I always feel like an old person when I say this, but we have two like white Cracker Barrel rocking chairs and our that are on our back porch, next to our pool. And every morning, the dog comes out there with us. We have a little standard poodle, Bella. She comes out there with us, and she sits there next to the pool, and we sit in our rocking chairs and drink our coffee and just talk about what's going to happen during that day. And it really just has helped, us be able to frame, the day. And it's hard sometimes when we don't have that time, because sometimes we just wake up late, or something happens, and a kid wakes up early or whatever, and we miss that time. And it's just that day is just not the same when you can really have that same habit that you do that kind of sets the tone for the entire day.
Right.
So I would say that's the biggest thing for me, is to be able to have that focused time with my wife, but also to be able to have that focused time so that we can both talk to each other about what's happening during that day.
Yeah. Do you do any meditation of any sort?
I do not. I don't do any meditation. I would say the biggest thing I do is, when there's, obviously our podcast that we have is called Tough Decisions for Entrepreneurs. So when we have tough decisions, my wife and I definitely talk about those decisions quite a bit.
Right.
And we also pray about them. I'm a big believer in, praying and asking for that guidance. And,
Sure.
and so meditation, I'm not a big meditation person myself. But I would say that the thing that would equate with meditation would be, being able to always, talk to somebody else about it, but also so that you're actually, focusing on or whatever that particular decision, but also praying about it too.
For sure. For sure. Who are your top 3 role models? I know you said you may not be able to pick 3, but at least give us.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think when I've read that question, kind of in the green room area, I was trying to contemplate who I would say here. I would say it's kind of, hard to say that they're true role models, more mentors of mine over the years. Like, and I think, a lot of times, not a lot of times, I think there's a big confusion about mentors and coaches. I think that a mentor is somebody that sometimes doesn't even know that they're a mentor.
Yeah.
But a coach is somebody that you can go and hire, and you pay, and you have regularly scheduled time and visits with them. Now, some mentors might know that that they're your mentor, but they're not necessarily a paid person. Like, they don't necessarily pay them for that mentoring. Obviously, that's just my thoughts on that. But I have my growing up, my wife's uncle, who I met him before I met her, and I met her through him. He's a chiropractor, and he's the one that really I've modeled a lot of my actions on. And it's interesting because I've now kind of surpassed him as being my mentor, and that sometimes he now calls me up for advice, which is cool, to kind of see the mentor and the mentee kind of shift roles a little bit.
Student becomes the teacher.
Exactly. And so, but I still look up to him, and I still feel like he's one of my first, real true role models or mentors as I was growing up. And I say growing up, I mean, I was 19, 20 years old when I first met him. So I was, already an adult at that time, but still very young. And then since then, I would say that my role models, I would say, 'cause I think as a role model or a mentor, you can either look to them to see what you should be doing, but you can also look to them to see what you shouldn't be doing. And so I would probably point to my parents as, my role models, because I don't necessarily look at them and say I learned a lot of things to do, in business.
Yeah.
But I learned a lot of things that they did wrong, and some of the things that they had done that they did in their businesses, and it's really helped me, be able to kind of shape who I am as a leader and who I am as a business owner. And then, of course, lately, as I recommended 10X rule, I like Grant Cardone. I think he's got a great energy about him,
Definitely.
and he's just I just feel like he's a genuine person overall. And I know he probably has his flaws, as do we all.
Exactly.
But I think you have to try to look at the best in most people and everybody, and try to focus on those things. So for the most part, I would always say that he's one person that I don't necessarily like all the stuff about his personality, but I think to be able to look at him and go, he motivates me every time I look at what he does and what he's doing, to just continue to do more and be better. And it just motivates me. And so I would probably say him as that third one.
I'm a big fan of Grant Cardone as well. I remember it's a few years ago, but my brother had brought home, the 10X CDs, and we listened to those quite a bit. And, I follow him on social media, and on the back of my car, I have a sticker from him because I bought like the booklet that he was selling. It says "Success is my duty."
Yep.
So
Yep.
I'm a big fan of his.
Yeah.
What would you say is your definition of success?
I guess it kind of goes back to I would say it goes back to my definition of what I would like to be doing in retirement,
Right.
because I think, this is a good question, because, there's everybody should have their own definition of success. Some people it's just strictly monetary. Some people it's not monetary, but it has a monetary component to it. There's certain levels. There's sometimes it's not wealth, but it's, just the friends that they have and the connections and the network and various things like that. So I would say for me, it kind of goes back to my definition of, being in retirement, of, being able to pick up and go and do whatever I want to do, whenever I want to do, for whoever I want to do. And because, like I mentioned earlier on that, my mom's, love language is that she's a giver.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's one of my flaws too. I like to be able to give things to people and stuff like that. And so I have learned to control that a little bit more, I think, than her, because of some of the situations that she's been in like that. But I like to be able to provide experiences for other people. And to give you an example, one of the things I did earlier this year is I have, you can't see on my screen right now, but I have a picture of a jet. And it's a jet that I will have at one point. And so one of the things that I wanted to do before I made that goal is I wanted to go and fly in some personal private jets and go travel around for various things. And so in my church, we have a few couples that, I wanted to bring on a trip to New York City. So along with my wife and I. And so I rented out a private jet and basically told them, I said, hey, we're going to leave on this date. We're going to leave. You're going to drop the kids off at school. We're going to go hop on this airplane, this jet, and we're going to fly up to New York City. It's going to take us about an hour and a half to get there. We're going to take a helicopter from the airport and then fly into one of the heliports in Manhattan.
Mm-hmm.
Spend the whole entire day there, have dinner, and we'll be back at home in our beds by 11 o'clock that night. And so I said, all you have to do is worry about trying to find the babysitter, so for somebody to pick up your kids from school, so that you can spend the rest of the day there, and we'll be back home by midnight.
Right.
We'll be able to spend the entire day in New York City. And so it was a lot of fun. They were, of course, ecstatic about it and excited. And, it wasn't my first time in a private jet. I've done a couple of private jet, trips, here and there.
Mm-hmm.
But I like being able to create experiences for other people. And my original goal with it was to just bring my wife and I up there to spend a day up in New York. But I knew that there was 4 other seats on the plane. And so there was actually 5 other seats on the plane, but I thought it would be kind of weird to have an extra person, an extra person on the plane. So we left that one open, but we had an amazing time. It was a lot of fun, and there was a lot of what I like to call firsts. And so I
Yeah.
like to create a lot of firsts for people. It was their a lot, I think it was everybody on there. It was their first time flying in a private jet. It was their first time to New York. It was their first time eating steak at Delmonico's restaurant, the Wagyu steak, the really expensive steak. It was the first time that they had flown in a helicopter, and there was the first time they were at the what's the Rockefeller Center,
Yeah. Yeah.
going up the Rockefeller Center. So there was a lot of different firsts, and I liked being able to create that. And that's the kind of thing that you can't take away from somebody as an experience.
Hmm.
And the biggest thing that has allowed me to think about that is, I have a friend of mine whose grandparents worked 30, 40, 50 years, and then they finally retired. And one of the things that they wanted to do at their retirement is to be able to create experiences for people, and not for people, but for their family. And
Hmm.
so they retired from this job or what, I think it was like a blue collar job, but they had saved up a really good nest egg. I think they had a little over 7 figures that they had set aside that was going to take care of them, allow them to create experiences for people or for their family. And so instead of like buying them things or gifts, they were going to create experiences for them. So the first thing they did was, within 6 months, is they bought a plane ticket for all of their family members to fly to Hawaii and spend an entire week in Hawaii. And so they spent a lot of money doing that. Well, 90 days later, they got both the mom and the dad, the grandma and the grandpa, got killed in a car accident by a drunk driver. But the biggest thing there is that if they would have just bought those family members gifts, they wouldn't have remembered those things.
Right.
But they left this earth with an experience, and they were able to leave that for their family to remember them by, and they still remember that trip today. But if they would have bought them some sort of widget or whatever, or car, it'd be gone.
Yeah.
So to be able to create experiences is my definition of success, of being able to create your own experiences, but also being able to create experiences for somebody else.
For sure. Experiences mean so much more than materialistic things.
Yep.
What would your advice be to our listeners?
I would say that the biggest thing is, whenever you find something that is aligned with your why in life, that you relentlessly implement that. I'm actually, along with my wife, we're in the process of writing a book called Relentless Implementation, and it will hopefully be out Q1 of next year, of 2019. And that book, Relentless Implementation, will talk about the various things of how to get your mindset in a state of being able to be able to consistently, relentlessly implement. Grant Cardone couldn't be where he is without relentless implementation.
Right.
But his why lines up with what he is doing right now, which allows him to continue to create that strong and powerful desire to continue to implement. And until you can align those various pieces in your life, you can't relentlessly implement, because you won't have the energy to go forward. There's no way that you can. I'm sure anybody can probably tell you this, where they've been in that state of relentless implementation, that it doesn't feel like work. Like the stuff that I do right now doesn't feel like work. Like, I don't go home and go, oh man, I just had to spend all day at the office. I go home and I'm like, yeah, it was a hard day at the office, but it was fun. I enjoyed it. I can't wait to do it again tomorrow.
Exactly.
Do I have bad days or down days? Yeah, sure. Everybody has those, but I'm just glad that I have more better days than I have, down days. And
Right.
my why aligns with that stuff. And so that's what allows us to be able to connect and stuff. So.
Awesome. Well, I just want to take a moment to thank you for everything you do, for who you are, and being a role model. Even though you said you don't have too many role models, but for being a role model to other people and to entrepreneurs, much like yourself. And thank you for putting out the content that you do through your podcast, Tough Decisions. You want to talk about that for a few minutes?
Yeah, sure. So, when my wife and I started in June of 2018, a podcast called Tough Decisions for Entrepreneurs. And that's actually where you and I first got connected is I was able
Right.
to find you on LinkedIn and reached out to you and, able to have you on the podcast. So I appreciate that. The biggest thing with the podcast is we try to interview entrepreneurs from around the world that can kind of dive into some of the tough decisions that they've had to make along their journey of success. Because there's a lot of podcasts out there that always, talks about the fluff, the good stuff, and
You're right.
how they got to that level. But I like to kind of dive into some of the tough decisions that they made. And so we usually try to dive into two different types of tough decisions: one that turned out really good, and one that turned out not so good. And it ends up usually being that the not so good one is where we dive into a lot, because we learn lots of lessons from those not so good decisions. And so, as business owners and entrepreneurs and things like that, even for non-entrepreneurs, there's still a lot of good, just, life advice that happens
Sure.
inside of each one of those episodes. So, your listeners can find out more information from it by going to toughdecisions.net. And we also have a free weekly entrepreneur email that we send out every week, that allows them to be able to get the latest quotes from all of our people that we interview. It also gives we talk about the latest technology for business, and then also inside of that email we recap some of our episodes and then talk about some of the latest books in business as well. So
Awesome.
that's toughdecisions.net. And again, thank you, Brandon, for having me on. I've really enjoyed it, and hopefully your listeners got some good information from it too.
Yeah, for sure. Tell us at least one tough decision that you've had to face.
Oh, well, I always go back, my sore thumb tough decision that I always go back to is a tough decision about letting an employee go that I knew did not do anything wrong. And I wasn't letting her go because anything happened. But it was in the transition period where, I told you from the beginning that my background is in chiropractic, but
Mhm.
we started to integrate medicine into our practices. And so I fell in love with a field of medicine called regenerative medicine, where we do a lot of prolotherapy, PRP, which is platelet-rich plasma therapy, and stem cell therapy. And we found that was really where we wanted to be in the practice. And so I had to make some changes to allow us to be able to move in that direction. And I didn't feel like that person, she was the office manager at the time, I didn't feel like that person was the right fit for what we were doing. And so I made the decision that I was going to have to let her go. She was a great person, nothing wrong with her, great with the staff, great manager. But I just knew from a leadership standpoint that she wasn't going to be the right fit to take us to the next level. And so it was hard because I was making that decision in December.
Mhm.
And so I had to let her go in December. But I was nice about it. I waited until after Christmas, and then of course I gave her a nice severance package or whatever. So I wasn't completely just like goodbye. But it
Yeah.
was a very hard decision. And I think, most of the time when we have tough decisions, our fears from these tough decisions are really fears that we have from of things that have happened in the past.
Mhm.
And so meaning that, we have experiences that happen in the past that cause us to create these artificial fears in our head. And literally, I remember that time when I let her go, where I sat her down in my office. And anytime I let somebody go, I always have somebody else in the room just for, just make sure that everybody knows what happened or whatever.
Right.
And so I had her in the room, and then my COO at the time, my operator, uh, chief executive or chief operating officer. I couldn't figure the word, and so of course, I couldn't sleep the night before. I worked all this emotion up and all this kind of stuff, and I sat down and I talked with her, and you know, it was to the point where I was almost crying. Actually, I would probably say I was crying, because if that guy was listening, my operator, my COO at that time is still my COO now. He's now my CEO, and so he would probably laugh and go, "No, you were definitely crying. You definitely had some tears in your eyes." But I had worked out so much emotion, and because I didn't know how she would react, and I was affecting her life. That's the hard part. Is
Yeah.
you're affecting the livelihood of somebody when that happens, and so I let her go, and it was the funniest thing. Not the funniest. It was the neatest thing that she basically was like, "Okay, it's not a problem. I understand. So it's not a problem at all." So, and I was like, "Okay." So it all worked out.
Awesome. Yeah. Usually things work out better than we think they will.
Yeah.
Well, how can we connect with you? We've got toughdecisions.net. We can find you on LinkedIn as well, correct?
Yep, I'm on LinkedIn. I'm on Facebook. I think the two easiest ways, or three easiest ways to get me is one is on LinkedIn. I'm under Dan Handford, and then you can also look me up on the toughdecisions.net website, and then you can also look me up on the handfordcapital.com.
Awesome. And I'll have those linked up in the show notes as well for the
Awesome.
listeners. And for everyone that's listening, be sure to check out his podcast, Tough Decisions. It's available pretty much everywhere, right? iTunes,
Yep.
Stitcher, Google Play.
Yep. Everywhere you can find your iTunes or your podcast, we're on there. So
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you for coming on the show.
thank you so much, Brian. I appreciate it. Keep up the good work.
You too.
All right. Bye.